les baffes extérieures pour le moment. Si c'est là, si vraiment vous voulez commencer, quoi, que ça marche pas. Go back.
Or is everybody doing okay with the staff and everything from this week? I know it's probably, I don't want to bring up sad news, but just making sure that everybody's
So
okay.
it should be live by now.
If there's anything we can do.
Right.
Very difficult, John.
Yeah, I can't even imagine.
You're live.
Okay. Yeah, we were just talking about Peggy yesterday and just how sad we are for the school community, for her family, her loved ones. So do let us know if there's anything that we can do. But we'll officially get started. Welcome to the June 26th board retreat. We are excited to have partially in person and some people virtual for this meeting. Has everybody had a chance to review the agenda?
Yes.
And can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion, Michelle. Motion to approve agenda, Michelle.
Second.
Second, Marvin.
Awesome. Any objections or any discussion? Everybody in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, awesome. So as you all could see, we did shorten the agenda. We know we have quite a few people still virtual, and we felt like a 4-hour agenda, that's a lot to ask of people virtually. And these are such important conversations that we're having that we really want everybody to be fully present and engaged in the conversation. So we felt like 2.5 hours is about as far as we could push that conversation to keep us all sort of engaged and a part of it. And so the part that we don't get to today, we will do at the July meeting instead, because we did talk about with everything going on, we're not able to sort of forego a July meeting, but we'll have sort of a shortened special meeting, essentially just with particular topics that we'll discuss. I do want to say thank you to Gwen Posh. She was a tremendous help in really thinking with us about what the agenda should look like, and working with Shireen, who you all will remember from Education Board Partners. She helped to facilitate our retreat, our sort of 2 retreats last year, and will continue to be with us for part of our time this morning to really take a deeper dive into the work of our committees and the data. How do we use data in our equity work and think really strategically about that? So thank you to Gwen for really helping to put that all together. I'm curious, oh, were you trying to say something? I'm curious, do we have Shireen here yet?
Yes.
Yes, I'm here.
Awesome.
Good morning.
Good morning, Shireen. It's so good to see you. Thank you for joining us again today. I will go ahead and hand it over to you.
Oh, fantastic. So great to see you all this morning. Revved up and excited to talk about academic data. I need to share my screen. Do I have that capability? Okay. Give me 1 second.
Eliman, can you stop sharing so that Shireen can share?
Here we go.
Okay, now I see. There we are.
There. Awesome.
Fantastic. Welcome. Excited to be here again and to support you all and to do a high-level overview of some important topics around the board's role in academic oversight. I'm Shireen Williams from Education Board Partners. Might as well go through my deck. We're a national nonprofit that supports charter schools, and so I've been with you all a few times before. These are our core values, and just want to remind everyone that I will share this deck, and so not going to read all of this because you definitely will have a time on your own to take it home with you, and if you really want to dive into our core values, you can. So wanted to toss this up here for everyone to read.
Good.
And just to say that I appreciate once again this group taking a minute to step back and think about your performance and think about your practice, and just to continually strive to do the most that you can to be great board members and to be an effective board. I know we have some new folks. So I just wanted to remind you about the standards for effective governance. And these are the standards that my organization uses to guide our work with boards. And you may notice most recently, I guess in the last year or so, we have added that center, people, equity, and culture at the bottom. And for a few reasons, but one, because we always say that board work is people work. But what we've noticed throughout this work is that you can have all of the processes and the policies and the strategies, but if you're not really thinking about relationships and how everything is affecting you as individuals and as your students, those things won't be effective. So for us, centering people, equity, and culture is what everything should be grounded in. And so for today's work, we are going to be right in standard 3, exemplary governance, and specifically talking about committees, the school performance committee, and academic oversight. So let's quickly talk about board committees. If I can have just from you, some of the things you've heard, some of the things that scare you, some of the things you like. I don't know if you guys want to come off mute or if you want to write in the chat, it's up to you. But I want to know what you know about committees.
Committees are where the work gets done.
Love that one. Others?
Committees are there to support the work of the strategic plan.
Anybody unsure about committees or have something not so great about committees?
Committees are not to govern.
Great.
Right. Yeah, I was gonna say one myth or one thing you have to be careful of is sometimes you have one committee that kind of runs the board, so you have to be careful of that, I think. But
definitely. Anybody else? Okay, so you're right. I heard some great things. We generally say 80% of the work of the board should be done in committees. And that they save time. I think another thing that people often can forget is that committees are a way to increase board member engagement and enjoyment, right? It's easy to come to full board meetings and sometimes not know specifically where you add value, and knowing that you can take your specific expertise and your background and direct it toward the work of a particular committee really serves as a great tool for engagement for board members. That these committees should be clear on their goals and have a strong chair to manage the committee. That there's a sense that you are working, like I've heard from a few of you, with the full board, right? Not in isolation, not a fiefdom, not governing, but doing some work that really supports the work of the full board. Advising, not making decisions. And also that just as the board looks at how it's performing, committees should do the same too. Step back and make sure that you are efficiently and effectively doing the work that you're charged with doing. So what committees do charter school boards generally have? Anybody? You can toss it in the chat.
We have finance committee.
What else?
Development.
I see governance. Tanya, I didn't hear what you said.
Diversity.
Okay, diversity. What else?
Development.
Yep, fundraising. You guys are writing and saying, so all good ones. And I will say, Oh, go
But we
ahead.
have a leader, we have a leadership committee? Yeah.
Okay, or like an executive committee? The one thing that I wanted to say about this, and you all seem to get the gist of it, is that the committees that you have should really come out of the work, governance and nominating, great. The work that you are slated to do. And what I mean by that is occasionally I have run into organizations, schools where they have committees around things that are really not in their purview, right? So I had a school that had a curriculum committee. Like what's the matter with that?
Everything?
That's what the teachers and staff are for.
Thank you, right? You don't need committees around things that are not your job. That is the job of the school staff. So at this point, why you are here today is because you really want to know, okay, Shireen, we got it, but what are we supposed to do? What are these committees, what are these people supposed to do as they are coming together? So I wanted to share briefly some of the ones you mentioned, and then we'll hone in on the school performance one. So definitely the finance committee. I heard many of you talk about this one, and I think this is one of the committees that I'm not going to say, I don't want to say that it's easy, but if you're on the finance committee, mostly what we hear is that because you have very specific tasks that you are required to do, it's a little bit easier to figure out, right? Just because you know there are reports you need to look at, there's money to count, there's things you need to make sure of. And so it's very fiduciary, it's either right or it's wrong. And so this is not a committee, although it can be a lot of work, it's not a committee where people are confused about what they need to do. The governance committee, one of my personal favorites, of course, is one that is really leading the board's performance. So when we talk about one, nominating and getting new folks, when we talk about board assessments, when we talk about different things that you guys might have to hand in, like conflict of interest or redoing your board member agreement, really making sure the board is a well-oiled machine, maintaining the board manual and other board documents and tracking tenure. Now, when we talk about the school performance committee, and so I'll say it today, school performance, academic oversight, academic excellence, there's a number of things you can call it, but definitely the committee that is charged with taking the lead in supporting the full board in understanding just how well students are doing. Now, can share with me some of the things that make people a little apprehensive about this committee. And I see I might have a question in the chat.
Yeah, so I think that's what we consider our leadership committee, what you call performance.
Okay, so tell me more about that. Who's on that leadership committee?
I am.
I'm on that.
Mike Bland leads it.
Gwen's on it. Harriet's on it. And I think that's it right now.
And it also includes the school staff, right? Your school leader.
Yes.
That's right. Yep.
Okay.
The board chair is also on there, but I never get to go to the meeting. So I'm kind of de facto, or the board chair is like the de facto member of all committees.
Okay. So for the purposes of this conversation, your leadership committee is what we're talking about in terms of school performance and academics. Got it.
Yes.
Tell me what sometimes can make people apprehensive about this committee, because this is the one that we do get lots of questions about, or even schools that just don't have one.
It can bleed into operations pretty easily.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's it. It can tend to get kind of in the weeds a little bit too much.
Okay. That's something we definitely want to be careful of.
And with our particular situation, we have we have formal parent elected board members and quite a few board members who are parents. So there is a concern, or we want to make sure that we're aware that there is no conflict of interest between, you know, a parent being on the committee and, you know, the head of school, right? There could be a conflict there if their own student is having issues or whatever. So I think that's one thing that when we formed this committee, we didn't want parent elected members to be on there because we didn't want people to campaign. You know, it could just open up a whole new can of worms. But that's one thing that we have to make sure we're careful about.
That's a great point, a great nuance to think about, because we definitely don't want there to be conflict of interest. We want to maintain confidentiality, and we also don't want your school leader to be in a inappropriate situation if parents were trying to leverage this role for their own family members or students' benefit. Mr. Mbang, were you raising your hand?
No, he's talking with the IT guy right now.
Okay.
I'm trying to solve technical issue at the same time. Sorry.
Okay. Anybody else? Apprehension about this committee?
No, but I agree with Tanya. I think we should change our name to School Performance Committee.
Okay, well, that's something to note. One thing you all didn't raise, and it may just be because you have enough folks who are comfortable with academic data, but lots of times people just don't feel comfortable. They don't feel like this is their space to be. They don't feel like they're like, I've never run a school. I don't know this data, and so I don't belong on this committee. And so that is not the purpose. Now, of course, this is the committee where it works best if you have academic folks, if you have people who are used to looking at academic data and have some expertise and can work well with the school leadership around that. So that is what works best. But it is also the job of everyone on the board to do their best to understand and be able to really know how students are doing. So let's talk specifically about this committee. So again, it is a combination of key school staff, your school leader, or chief academic officer, and board members with academic expertise, really digging down and taking a look at the data. Now, one slide that I didn't include that I usually include, we usually have this, this funnel diagram. And everybody knows a funnel, right? It's very big at the top. It gets smaller as you go down. And the idea behind the funnel is that we know all of the data that schools have, tons and tons of data. The very top of the funnel is all of that data, and that is not for the board, right? That is for the school staff, right? The very bottom, the smallest part of the funnel, that would be the board, the board level data. In the middle is the school performance committee, right? That's what we're talking about. They're not looking at every single thing, but they are diving a little bit deeper than the board would, so that they, along with the school leader, can collaborate and figure out what is it that the full board needs to see, because they don't need to see everything. So let's work together and see what it is that we need to show the board. And as you come into this committee, these are some of the questions that you should be thinking about. We call these committee prompts or thought catcher, but really thinking about, okay, as I begin to look at this data, what are some things that I should be thinking and asking? So I'm gonna let you read some of these. So what are some of your immediate reactions to these prompts for the academic or school performance or leadership committee?
I think two things kind of come to my mind right now. I was trying to get my head wrapped around a little bit about the school staff piece. And then the second piece is, you know, kind of that conversation about Académie Lafayette is a high-performing school, and how do we look at kind of some of that growth data rather than just looking at the end result? How are our students really growing, and how do we dig into that a little bit? I mean, because that's pretty cool data.
I love that, Gwen, because you're hitting on a couple of things. One, you're hitting on a key question, right? How are our students growing? But you're also sort of raising something that would go to the board level. When you think about the rest of the board not being well-versed in academic data, this is the type of thing that you would want to draw attention to, right? Are we looking at growth? I worked with another school in Kansas City, and one of the things the person on the academic committee was saying was that they had these charts at the meeting, right? And board members were honing in on the students in below basic, right? And you know, as they should be concerned with those students. But one of the things that she was saying was she did some other charts where she was able to show the growth, where she was able to show, well, we had this many students in below basic, and now we have this many. And this is how we compare to the city, and this is how we compare to the state. So it changed the conversation. So this is at the school performance committee level, sort of thinking about what the rest of the board needs. We're gonna go a little deeper and just think more holistically about the board and some overall questions. But anything else about these questions?
Shireen, these questions for me seem like they're scratching the surface. And I think as I have been on this board over the years, the conversations run pretty deep. We ask questions about discipline. We ask questions about gender and demographics, and, you know, is everyone being treated fairly and equitably? What are the special needs that we need to be thinking about? Who are the outliers that we need to bring into the community? I've seen a lot of really wonderful, loving, caring questions that really unpack, you know, the layers of the onion. And so for me, this is kind of like the base level questions, but so many times I've seen us go deep, and I'm really proud of that fact. And I think it comes from this committee, but other board members chime in and ask good questions. So for what that's worth, I feel like that's my perception.
I love that. And we're going to get into some more of those and what you were talking about. So the role of the board in academic outcomes. So the big responsibility you have is, yes, to understand how the school defines and measures student achievement. And so that means discussing with the school leader, reviewing the targets, and approving the annual goals. And making sure that student performance is centered in all of your discussions and your decision-making. And it sounds like, and I'm really happy that this is a board that understands that and doesn't think that the academic performance is something that is not their role. Yes, you're not teaching the students every day, but that this is definitely something that you have to have an eye on. So I think getting to what Tanya was talking about, what does that mean, right? Like the board tracks and aggregates student performance data by subgroup. Have you all noticed anything? Well, one, are you doing this? And have you noticed anything about particular subgroups in your school, or anything that gives you pause?
I guess my perception is we definitely look at sort of the kind of data that you have listed here. Academic data, participation data, is it equal across subgroups, achievement gaps, what does that look like? My worry is where we don't focus enough on is how do we measure changing school culture? How do we measure belongingness of our students and families? Because I think oftentimes that gets in the way of continuing to move the achievement gap and lessen the achievement gap. And so I think those are directly correlated, but we struggle to know what are the tools we should be using to measure those sort of more subjective pieces of the work, essentially.
So it sounds like some of what you're saying, Beth, is related to the development of the relationships with the family. And so that could be a subset of what the development committee looks at. How are we engaging with families? Maybe it doesn't all have to be done on this committee. It can be shared.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think all of this work, the question is, what's the role that each committee plays in sort of supporting that? So yes, I totally agree. It doesn't just fall to one committee.
So when I look at this information, I think about, where we were, let's say 7 years ago, where we were 5 years ago. And I look at the work that we've done in terms of equity across the board throughout our school. We saw disparities in discipline rates. We saw that there was an achievement gap with certain subgroups. And so from a board's perspective, I think it's absolutely our responsibility to ask those questions. Why does that exist? And then to, put the responsibility on the school leadership to develop the solutions. Because again, we might make some recommendations or provide information, but I think we have to be there to be supportive of those solutions that really make us have a holistic program that meets the total needs of our students. I think we've done a good job of that over the past, I'll say over the past 5 years. We've shown great growth, but I think it's really been a great working relationship between the board as well as our school leadership and trying to make sure that we meet the need of all students. So I think this is absolutely critical.
Yeah, I'd agree with Marvin and Beth, actually. But, I think from where we were 5 years ago, just to pull a number out, I think we've made tremendous strides in our effort in trying to target things. I mean, we do definitely look at data and performance and things like that broken down by subgroups and age and things like that. But I think now what Beth said is that, we need to take the next step and address or figure out how to make sure that the gap is eliminated and never comes back. And so I know that in the past year, the diversity committee has really expanded, and they enlisted a lot of involvement from a lot of parents. And so hopefully, and staff too, I believe. And so hopefully we're down the path of making sure that we address the needs of every student. And like Marvin said, making sure that our program is holistic and meets the needs of every student.
And the other thing that I'm curious about, I mean, sort of even as we think about the discipline data that we've looked at, we'll look at out of school suspension numbers. Those numbers are tiny because we are really very purposeful that out of school suspension is not a good strategy. It doesn't help students learn. So those numbers are so small that it's tough to really read anything into those. But how do we drill that down even to the classroom level? What students get their name written on the board, or I mean, those kinds of things that maybe don't lead to suspension, but indicate culture in the classroom, essentially. So really trying to figure out how do we look more closely at that kind of data as well.
So my point or thought is, one of the things we talk about, and we've been talking about for every retreat, is we need some sort of dashboard or something that picks up, because we're talking right now about how we do with subgroups, review. We haven't seen any numbers lately. I mean, let's be honest. When was the last time we saw some numbers, guys? Because of the pandemic, we haven't, we've run obviously our MAP tests do not come until September, but we haven't seen any real numbers or anything since the pandemic. And yes, we were doing a really good job. We talk about it, but I still say we need some sort of monthly dashboard, something that shows more number crunching on test score. As a parent, I was always interested in test scores. And I know that's bad, but that's what drove me crazy. So that would be something I would like to see still.
I totally agree, Harriet. And I think that's part of the goal of our conversation today. We've talked about wanting a dashboard, but we haven't drilled any deeper other than, what are our academic scores and our discipline? And so what is the data that we really want to see on that dashboard that we can look at on a regular basis? So I think that is absolutely the goal, to start that conversation today, to finalize, to make sure we move in that direction this year.
Okay, fantastic. Anybody else? I heard a lot of great things. Just trying to see. So one, I heard the last comment I heard loud and clear about the dashboard. And I know that is something that lots of folks struggle with. And I don't have examples of dashboards today, but I can share or two with you. And we actually have, we did a webinar recently here in DC about academic oversight and are launching a new tool. So I'll be able to share that with you guys probably in the next couple of weeks, but definitely am gonna pull up a slide just looking at different data points and we can talk about that. I heard about parents and the parent relationship and how do we pull all of that into this and just the overall school culture. And so it's interesting in what I noticed, and I'm sure what you noticed, even given Harriet, I love your comment that you want to see the test scores and we want to talk about data. But what we notice is that it is just so much more than test scores, right? You all have a very holistic view and need a very holistic view to really understand how the school is doing and what is the experience of students and families who attend your school, and is that equitable across the board, and to the extent that it's not, what can we do? And so I love that. I'm also pleased to hear that you've done so much work and so much growth around just equity and paying attention to the right things and asking the right questions. So just want to make sure we covered.
Well, one thing I want to say though is the last time just to answer to Harriet's concern, the last time we had a data is the last time we had a normal school year.
Yes.
Remember that when we have always invited, for instance, Bruce from UCM, he's the one coming to present the data. The last fall, he was at school presenting the NWA of the fall. Last year, we did not have last spring, we didn't have NWA, we didn't have map test. And the map test we had was presented. We've also presented discipline data in 1920, and admission data always, every time present what we have and so on. So what we need probably is gather all those things, have a periodicity to do it. But I think that whether it's academic or discipline or demographic data, it has been at least once a year presented. Now, I think that there is a discussion to be had, how deep should we go as a board? I think that, in my opinion, and it might not be shared, of course, by board members or by a facilitator, I don't think it's the board role to go to the classroom, one individual teacher classroom, and say what's happening there. I think that the board look at the whole school and the whole buildings, and if there's questions, to ask discrepancies and ask question again and see why this. And that's how I see it, because the board's role is to look at the pulse or the vital signs of the school. How discipline, the culture is going, how is discipline going, how is the test scores disaggregated is going. And also, of course, diversity, all those things. But I don't think it's the role of the board to be behind the shoulder of each teacher and see what's happening in their classroom. That's my opinion. You may not agree with that, but that's what I think.
I agree with that too.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think, thank you for that. And someone else was speaking?
Oh, I was just saying, I agree too.
Yeah, so definitely get it. And I think that is what we are talking about, right? Understanding how do we get the information that the board needs to play its oversight role. We definitely do not want to step into management's lane, and we definitely do not want to get too deep into the weeds. However, what I'm hearing is like, how can we determine, one, what is it that we should be looking at, right? Two, what is the cadence, right? So I'm hearing a couple of things of, should we look at stuff every month? Are we getting something twice a year? But what is the cadence? You know, what should be in our board materials every month? And then this notion of the dashboard, right? And what are those specific points that we need to see? And they're going to be more than just test scores. Yes, there's going to be some test scores, but there's going to be more than that. And also definitely take your point about the pandemic. We're talking about best practices, but knowing that we're all operating in a past year and a half that have been unlike anything we've ever seen before, and that boards are definitely grappling with having less data and just children not having a normal year. And so sort of deciding how to look at that. So definitely keep that in mind as we are looking at these and hopefully trying to get back to a little more of what was normal. So this slide is just giving examples of who plays what role in this relationship, with the first part being setting the long-term annual and academic goals, and then the second part being monitoring the academic results. I think it's always important to, one, sort of state upfront and understand. So like all of your committees should have a charge and a description that those folks know what they're responsible for, and the board overall should have the same. And so let me stop talking for a minute. Feedback on this chart and what it says about the roles. Questions? Agree, disagree?
Agree.
Great. So let me think. Oh wait, let me get I see. Great. So take a look at some suggested data on here. I want to know surprising, not surprising, what you're in the habit of looking at, what you're not in the habit of looking at, and also what's missing. What's here, what's not here that you would want to see.
One of the, I mean, I've only been on the board for a year. I don't remember seeing achievement of special ed, or I don't remember seeing anything on advanced achievement. I don't remember seeing data broken out to that level.
We have he's given a report on how many kids are in our special ed. You know, the percentage of our children and I don't know if it's a yearly report, but he has given a report on that. And he does give a year report on how many kids take our advanced algebra or upper English.
Yeah, the advanced classes. Okay, but so we've got the numbers they're taking, but I don't know that we talk about the achievement of them.
No, we've never.
Okay.
Yes, we.
Go ahead.
Somebody was
Can you hear me?
I'm thinking about the earlier slide that you had that talked about extracurricular activities and kids that are involved. And I think when we I think where we're at in our region right now, I think looking at those extracurriculars, I think it was on an earlier slide. I think that's kind of a big deal in looking at the whole picture, because we want to make sure that we have access and opportunity for kids in those extracurricular activities. And I'm thinking about the Kansas City just involved in an essential skills study. And what we're really learning is that kids that are in young professional age are really going back to those extracurriculars as being key components of who they are and what they're doing in their careers. So I think that's a place for us as well.
When you had a little bit, I heard most of what you said, but you had a little echo towards the end. But yes, I'm glad that you pulled me back to this slide, because I think this also what you said, but it also relates a little bit to what Beth said when we start connecting some of these things to culture and understanding when you do have these things, whether it's something like band or these advanced placement tests or opportunities to be in an advanced class, what does the participation look like? And so that is one of the ways when we think about sort of honing in on equity. Are we just looking at that? Or are we looking at that across the groups? And also, what do you do, right? Are there, well, let me ask you that question. Let me not answer it for you. In this situation, what do you do when you find that it is not an equitable distribution in terms of advanced classes or extracurricular activities?
I think on advanced classes we're fine, but on extracurricular activities, I think that's a good point. And I think then we need to sit with parents in one of our committees, I would say, and find out what it would take for the parents to enroll their kids into extracurricular activities. And it could take, soccer or whatever, track, whether, it's time, pickup, do they need a bus? Do they need services? I have no idea, but I assume that sometimes people can't do extracurricular activities because they don't have the financial or the capability to have their kids doing it.
Thank you, Harriet. So what you're essentially saying is if we do find these disparities, we need to get underneath and see what the obstacles are, right? If we find that certain groups are not participating, what are those barriers? I think somebody else was about to speak.
I was just going to sort of question what the role of the board is there. I think the role of the board is to ask the good questions, to look at the data, to know what gaps we have, and then charge the school team with, okay, we're worried about what we see here. How is the school team going to address it versus how are the committees going to address the issue essentially?
Exactly. I like that you pulled us back. And so going back to the committee level, right? This is something, if we have that data that we're regularly looking at, this is something that the school performance committee might raise for the full board, right? So this is a disparity we noticed for the full board to discuss. And like you said, have a conversation with the school leader and see how school staff think about handling that and mitigating that.
I also think we need to follow the money.
Yes.
Our fiduciary responsibility is to approve the budget. And if there are not budget items that address the things that we want to move the needle on, then how are we going to move the needle? Do we have volunteers that are in place to do something?
Great point. Great point. Really, that is a key lever that you have as a board in terms of how you use your finances and your resources. All right, I'm going to take us back. And then actually, I think that was the last bullet here. Adjusting budget as needed to allocate resources to support equitable outcomes. sorry. So going back here, so somebody raised about students receiving special education services. Great, Marvin, say more about your comment. I love it.
So so where we may have where we may find that we have improvement and or we may have regression or what have you within our academic program, I think, you know, we need to understand, you know, what we need to understand, not only student attendance, but what's our retention rate year over year of our students. You know, how are our family dynamics changing? So when Beth raised the issue of culture, when we lose a family, then, you know, what role does that play in the culture, in our culture changing at the school? Was that person involved even within the culture at a deeper level, so that they really felt like they belonged there, if you will? And then if they did, again, if they took for whatever reason that they left, if they took what their contribution with them, then that's part of the glue that holds us together, right? So that's going. So that's important. Same thing with faculty retention, which I think we're doing I think we're doing a good job of tracking why our teachers, why some teachers leave or what have you, and it's generally positive. But I think we just need to make sure that we're keeping our eye on that to understand where our academic program is going. And then faculty attendance. Do we have teachers calling in sick a lot? As a former teacher, I remember whenever we had great absences from our staff, we also saw a drop in academic performance because there was the inconsistency of instruction and, of course, the inconsistency of relationship between the students and the teacher. So I think all of those pieces of information could give us data to help us better understand what's happening and to and raise the right questions.
Okay, great. Others on this data?
I mean, I definitely agree. That stood out to me too, Marvin, just the retention of our families. So we always talk about, we have a low number of families transitioning out of Lafayette, I think 3% each year, but we don't know what's the breakdown of that, of which families are opting to leave. So I do think it would be interesting to see the data on that, how it breaks down, to know, are we really engaging all of our families, or is there a population that is more likely to leave Lafayette, essentially? So that definitely stood out for me.
And I think we had a great comment in the chat about the dashboard, right? Is this the dashboard? And I think it is, but so let me say a couple of things. One, I do not know who put together your data, right? So one of the things that I've seen are some schools have a data person, right? And so they have someone that can put all this together and spit it out every month, and it's great. Not everybody has that. So we have to temper what the board wants to see, what the academic committee wants to see, with what's possible for the school staff, right? And that's not to say that we just tell them, no, you have to do this, but really, working together. That's why we have the committee, working together to say, okay, what is it that we want to see? And then the other key point that I'm hearing from you guys is, how often do we want to see it? So what do we want to see? How often do we want to see it? And back to Mr. Mbang's point, what is the level of detail that we want to see? So I think we have the makings, like you said, the makings of a dashboard. And again, I can send you some samples. When we look at this data, some of the other things that have been mentioned, like Marvin just made a few great comments. And then we think about the cadence and the level of detail. What is something else that I don't think I have here? I don't see it. I may see it, but does anybody see anything that's missing, or any aspect that's missing?
Maybe fundraising. I mean, honestly, how much is coming in every month to fill the gaps? You know, because I've seen the school raise money for special needs that have come up, and that's significant. And it's good to monitor, you know, how many special situations are we embracing? And I want to back up about development. You know, I said earlier, follow the money. And if we don't have the budget, then we could enlist resources, volunteers, and make a job description. So development, in my mind, is always time, talent, and treasure. Not everybody can give cash, but maybe there are some opportunities for engagement. They have special talents. And so if we create job descriptions and committees and volunteers, all that relationship building that Beth was talking about, in my opinion, falls to the development team of making sure the needs are addressed. So I don't know if anyone else shares that perspective, but I'd like to see us expand it, not just the cash coming in, but also, you know, having a robust volunteer group that the development team manages and works with. Because at another school district, when there are special needs of families, that's often where the development, you know, fund helps support some of those special needs. And there's a mechanism in place for grants or special things.
So two things. What I love about the point that you just raised is what I find a lot of schools struggling with. They want to do fundraising, or they know they need to fundraise, but not always clear about why, what, how. And so what you're suggesting is what we learn from this data should direct how we fundraise, what we fundraise for. So definitely a connection and sort of showing the interrelationship of the work that committees do to support each other. And then also I see John's comment about the capacity to actually do pulling the data, and maybe that's something that you guys bring in.
Isn't that,
go ahead.
Isn't that, Mr. Bang, the position that the board approved to add to admin? Isn't that part of what that would be? I don't know if we've lost him.
No, I'm here.
Oh.
What's the question?
You know, somebody who can, on your staff, that can pull the data together, you know, compile and analyze this data in this dashboard. Isn't that what, you know, the board approved an additional admin position that you were adding? And isn't that what that would do?
Part of it is, no, not really. It's more of a digital communication and helping with processes.
Okay.
And supporting teachers with using of technology.
Okay, okay.
But the data, we have somebody whose role is student assessment and data coordinator, so that may help us do whatever data we need to provide it.
Okay.
So one thing we need to probably decide, because we thought that if in having the pulse with Tyler should help our data gathering. It's very cumbersome, but maybe we need to look into other companies that may provide, if Sharon knows, who provide the dashboard accessible to the board at any time. At this point, the pulse we have would mean give the boards the access to Tyler and with student information and all the things that I don't think is proper they should be seeing. But I don't know. Is there anything that any model you've seen showing about how to provide dashboard for boards or something like that?
Yes, and I can share some samples, and we have a tool that's coming out, and definitely hear your points about we definitely don't want to share anything that is protected or confidential information, which is really important to have the committee sort of work with this data and figure out what actually is going out to the board. And yes, there is, I know specifically one company that has been building out school dashboard, then you can take from that and get down to distill it down to the board information. So happy to share that. And then I saw a comment in the chat about strategic plan. And so, yeah, I think that's something else that can inform the data you're looking at, because you obviously want to track your progress to the goals in the strategic plan. So if there are things in there that need to be added to the dashboard again. So this is I would say on your behalf that one of the jobs of your committee is to figure out from this data, what do you want to see, right? What are we already seeing? What's on here that we haven't seen? What's missing from here? The other thing that I was noticing that I don't think I have here, maybe you guys see it, is just the notion of understanding where you are in the city, you probably, and in the state. And you may be aware of that, but how often do you want to compare how you're doing to similar schools and similar populations and how you're doing compared to the state? And I see two chats. Yep, great. Any comments about the comparative data?
One thing also I want to add is about the person. We have been working with UCM, and Bruce is the person who have been presenting our map data and our NW data. Maybe if he has a separate company, we have been working with him for how many years now? Maybe we can see what kind of data we need every month, and he can gather them and come and present it to the board. So but at the same time, the board meeting needs to be reconfigured. I think giving analyst report, we'll be having 3 hours of board meetings as opposed to focusing on the vital signs of the school, getting data, and then making governance decisions, as opposed to getting more information on things that can be resolved by an email.
Yeah. So let me raise this again. I see a comment in the chat. So let me raise this again. One, we are not saying that we need to see every single piece of data. So it's really important that led by the academic committee, school performance executive committee, that we decide what are these key pieces of data that we want to see. So I think I have a good starter list for you all to pull out. Yes, we want to see this. I think in our conversation today, a few people have added some other things. I think also when we think about some of the other comments that were made today about parent relationships and school culture, are there any data points that would fit in here? And then what I mentioned about how often we want to see, and maybe this part is not every month, but how often we want to see, maybe yearly, how we compare to others. So quite a few things to look at. Then there is the cadence, right? Is it every month? Is it every 2 months? And keeping in mind, some data changes every month, some data doesn't change every month. And going back to that other slide that I had earlier, and this is to bring in your school leader's point, the academic committee really needs to drive the conversation, because I get it. You don't want to now have all this data and now your board meeting is 3 hours long. That's not the point of it. The point is to have this good information, to have a committee that's leading the conversation and elevating, well, out of this great information that we got this month, this is the issue we want to elevate, or this is the topic that we want to talk about. And so the work will be putting together what you want, figuring out that cadence and sort of getting in the habit of using it and working together and using it to drive your conversations and your budget decisions. The challenge, I get it. So the challenge on the comparative, do we not have access to other schools? So I I think that will be dependent on what is readily available. I know different cities and different states do different things, but there may be some data. So I know here in DC, they recently started, I guess in the past few years, collecting and publishing suspension data. And then schools were able to see, why do we have all of these suspensions and then the school down the street doesn't have any? So it kind of gives you a view to think about. And so there may be some things that are readily available. There was another comment in here. Back to the fundraising. Yeah, that donors want to know why the gifts of their time, big visions. Yeah, I agree. Yes, and data is publicly available. I agree that having more access and more data helps you tell your story. I know we're running out of time, but I wanted to share 2 slides with different questions to sort of help you think about the data as you're looking at it and getting used to it, just to have these questions in your pocket, because I think, again, as you're beginning to look at this data and make use of it, you want to think about what is it that you want to know and what is it that it's showing you. And so I'm hopeful that these questions will help you begin to, tangle with the data a little bit. Out of this slide, is there a question on here that has just never crossed your mind, that you're having a real aha moment, that you're just not in the habit of thinking about or asking?
The question, the fourth question, should we implement a school review process, an external audit of our pedagogy when achievement is persistently low and current efforts have failed to make improvements? Even if it's not consistently low, I mean, just to better understand it, what are we doing well and why? But then, and I'll take it back to what Beth said, it could also help us better understand what is our culture. Is our culture really inclusive of our entire community that we serve? And so I think that review is extremely important if we really want to ensure that we have the best processes, the best environment for children. So that's one that just kind of rocked me.
Yeah, that's the first one that stood out to me too, and that's something that we've not directly addressed or targeted as something that we should be looking at going forward. I mean, because we kind of we've been such a successful school and are so good that we kind of tend to ignore our warts sometimes, or think that we don't have room for improvement in certain areas. And I think as we've gotten bigger, we're going to have areas that need to be improved, and we can't overlook those. And so I think that's something that we need to make sure we review, to make sure that what we're doing or what we did is going to keep working for where we're trying to go, if that makes sense.
You can keep talking. I have another set of questions too to look at. And if other folks want to talk, go ahead. Harriet, you want to say something?
No, I'm reading.
Okay.
And I wanted to sort of comment on what John and Marvin were talking about. It makes me wonder, to the point that we don't have consistently low performance, but we do have a persistent achievement gap. So where are there places that achievement gap is smaller, where we can sort of utilize strong practices that our teachers have to translate into other classrooms? So our achievement overall is strong, but our achievement gap still exists. So that sort of becomes the focus of that question for me, as far as just performance goes.
The last 2 bullets, since we've had the pandemic, the attendance is key, and perhaps not even something we necessarily would have measured, but I think it's really important to look at that aspect.
Definitely, the pandemic has impacted a lot of this. And Beth, I think what you were saying in the second bullet here, what are the school leadership's most significant cause of concern? I think you were highlighting something that has been a persistent issue to look at. Mike says finance committee measures attendance as it is directly tied to funding. So again, another example of how these committees all work together. And some of this is data that everybody is looking at. So awesome. And then, so we have 2 minutes left, and I wanted to get from you, what else? Like, what else do you need? Because if you want to build this committee with muscle and you want to make sure that you're looking at the right things and you want to begin to implement great habits, what else do you need? What else do you need to know? And remember, I said I have a new tool coming out about academic oversight and dashboard. So definitely we'll share that with you.
I think a big outstanding question for me that we've sort of talked about, but I'm not sure what to do about, is how do you measure culture? How do you measure belonging? Because I think it is very directly tied to academic achievement, but I don't think we have a good answer as to how do we do that? What are the tools to use to know if we're growing there?
Okay. Great. What else? What else do we still need? Have we, are we, with the current members of the committee, are they the right members? Do we need different people? Do we have the right people on that committee? I like it. Tanya's talking about surveys, parent surveys. That's a great tool to get feedback and engagement.
I think we have, hold on.
We're having sound issues here that we haven't figured out. So Michael's going into his own separate room. He'll be back.
Okay.
Okay. We lost a board member during the pandemic who was an educator. We have Gwen, and then we're going to be adding Beth to the panel. And she has a lot of education experience. So I think right now it's currently constituted, we have a pretty good membership for our board.
Okay.
And I'd also like to say, I think most of this can be achieved with a better presentation of the data. Again, the dashboard, Mr. Mbang presents much of this in meetings, and we discuss it in leadership. His performance and the school's performance is tied to the strategic plan. We just need to improve the quarterly presentation of this data to the board, or perhaps include it in a dashboard. Again, the dashboard needs to happen very soon.
Okay. So how do we measure culture? Dashboard templates. And that would also feed into the development of the dashboard would drive the cadence of, okay, so how often do we want to look at this stuff? How often do we need to repopulate this dashboard and include it in our board packets?
And Shireen, I have two questions. One, in the earlier you kind of said that membership might want to include a couple of school staff members in addition to LMA. Is that something that you're seeing? Because I think that could be very helpful initially, is to involve, whether it be like a principal of one of the schools or whatever on that committee. And then my other thought was, I feel like we have to kind of step this out. We just can't like have this presentation and, oh, the next meeting, we can do it all. I think we have to be very strategic on what we have the capacity to step out, but know that we have a goal. By the end of this year, we want to have X completed. By the end of the second year, we want to on our academic oversight, or I think we could be pretty overwhelmed, because right now I'm a little overwhelmed by what we can do to help here as a committee, but that's just my opinion.
So I love both of those. One, the more the merrier. If there are other school staff that want to be added to the committee, that is up to you all to decide. Two, I was going to say that we don't want to overwhelm the board, and we don't want to overwhelm your school leadership. We want to do this in a way that's manageable and collaborative, and you all can take one step at a time. And then Tanya had a great point about the diversity of the committee. So just thinking about representation when you do have these committees. Oh wait, I hear somebody talking.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think one thing though, so the committee, it seems like it's growing, or the duties of this, our leadership committee is expanded just based on this. I mean, the committee has done a lot of these things already, but it's primarily, its only focus was in evaluating the head of school. And so maybe we need a whole separate committee for academic oversight with maybe some of the same people, but the goal of that committee will be a little bit different when it's more data driven and this dashboard and things like that. Because the other committee, we used to have an HR committee, which we did away with and started this leadership development. I forgot what it's called, but leadership review committee. And really the whole sole purpose of that committee was to evaluate the head of school and his performance. And so a lot of the stuff we're talking about, that committee did in their evaluation of Mr. Mbang, but what we're talking about is immensely expanding what that committee does, or the goal of that committee. So I think there's some overlap, but we need to make sure that we still keep that piece a little bit separate. And if there needs to be a whole new committee with new members that include staff, because I don't think the leadership review committee should have staff on it. Just for HR reasons, or things like conflicts of interest, but this academic oversight committee most definitely should. And so I think maybe that's just another subcommittee or something, but we need to make sure we don't blur the line there between what the existing committee does and what this committee should be doing.
Great point. You definitely do not want staff on the leadership review committee. So you all may have some thinking to do about how these committees, and I see,
I think we basically are setting our goals. We should have all of this addressed by the end of the next school year. This should be our board goal. I think this is, we're supposed to set those anyway at the retreat, I think. So these are some good goals, and it's pretty clear.
And I can send with this deck, when I get off, I'll send you this deck. I can also send you our generic description for the school performance committee, so you can have something to work from.
Got it. Thank you.
Beth, were you going to say something?
Oh, no.
Okay, so I hope this got us to a good place to get started and to think. I'm going to give you some more materials, and then I'm going to keep working with Gwen to support you as you build out the committee and as you step fully into your academic oversight role. So thank you guys. This was great. And I'll chat with you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
And John, to your point, I mean, that was definitely our thinking with having that be the focus of the conversation today, that this is our goal over the coming year, that to Gwen's point, this doesn't happen overnight. This is very complicated work. I think it's the right direction for us to go. But it is a significantly different way that we have worked. So yeah, it will take time to really get there. So I know, I mean, we had sort of a quick 3-minute break in the, do people need a couple minutes to grab a cup of coffee? So let's take 5 minutes. It's 10:37. Can we reconvene at 10:42? Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay.
Where am I?
All right, do we have most people back? I think you'll see on the agenda, the next piece is we're going to walk through just an update on the strategic plan and pull out specifically goal number 2, which the diversity committee had been talking about wanting to update based on sort of where we are with that work. I'm going to let Mr. Mbang start, but before we do, I failed to do one really important thing at the start of our meeting and introduce our newest board member, who we are really excited has joined us this morning. Dr. Jen Goldman is our parent-elect position. That this is her first official board meeting. She had been supporting the reopening task force, so we are very excited to have her as an official board member this morning.
Well,
and I will say, I'd already asked her for her bio and info to, you know, update her and get her on the website as of July 1st. She's a quick responder, guys. That's good.
Okay. We have. Why? Okay. I'm out of that room because I have 2 computers. One of the computer is the one that can project on the screen, and I'm working with my computer that has the presentation. That's the things we're trying to do. And so this is the diversity and inclusion statement that we just revised, that you will be able to see again and then decide whether or not we will keep it, because the diversity and inclusion committee went over this new statement, and at the same time went through the goal 2, because we saw the goal 2 needed to be revised and would be discussed later. So now for this presentation, as you know, we're out of a, 1.5 years almost of pandemic, and our focus was less on our strategic plan, trying to survive the pandemic, teaching our teachers how to teach online, how to use technology, and our resources were all geared towards that. Yes, we wanted to have equity in especially the availability of technology and so on. But again, our goal was completely shifted. Priority was not our strategic plan as opposed to trying to survive and completely change things. So at the same time, I'm trying to give a report on whatever was done the last 1.5 years based on the data we have. On the goal number 1, we are at 40% of new minority. As you can see, we have a slight this year, we have a decrease this year of what we achieved in terms of enrollment and retention across the board. But we can see that we did not get to more than 40% of the new K being minorities. Our goal was have 50-50. And for these numbers are for last year, because the coming year we don't have them now for the free and reduced. The pre-K is 33%, and for free and reduced lunch percentage, we hope to get to 25 to 26%, at least 25%, to keep moving. We are not there. So maybe with the new data, it might be way over that, because I think many of our parents and community members lost their job and their status may change. So this is for, not for next school year, but the current one. It's the same as I said. Retention rate, as you see, we have a huge, from 2010 to 2021, 20 to 21, our attrition rate was higher than what we used to have. We used to have around 4% attrition for 5.45% and get to 8% attrition this year, and it affects across the board our low income and also many of our population. Some of the affluent population had a choice to go to private schools, but we have seen that some parents decide to keep their kids at home or relocated. And we have, our biggest attrition is from first grade to second grade.
Mr. Mbang, I think there's an error on the 1819/20. That adds up to 137.
Pardon?
Oh, maybe I'm looking at only what I'm seeing on the screen and adding it up.
Which one?
Down at the bottom. Okay, so, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't add it up right. Okay, I didn't see the full amount. Okay.
So these numbers, the other one shared with you by Robin back in March or April. It's after the lottery. There's the numbers at where we are. If you can look at it, 18-19, we're at 55% minority, 58%, and we start going down 20 and 21, 48 and 41. This is a drop, significant drop, I think, based on what we wanted to be at least above 50% for attracting minorities for kindergarten. So goal 2, we're going to keep it because we revised. One of the reasons we revised it is, remember, those who attended the strategic plan, when we did it, it looks like everybody put it something that they thought would be cool or good, but they don't think at the operationality side of people who are going to implement it. And we have been having trouble seeing what do we do with these things. Some we could do it, but there's no coherence to serve the purpose of the goal. So that's why we did it. But still, there are certain things that we have done in terms of collecting data. Even though, again, last year we did not do the finishing year. We did not do surveys of parents and students. I'm talking about 2021. So yeah, objective number 2 was too vague, and I'm gonna skip this one and we will come back to that. For goal number 3 is more of a student achievement, is every student at Academy will be successfully educated. Yeah, again, as you know, this last year, there was not a lot to report other than the slide of our student achievement in NWA from fall to spring, and it affected every student across the board. We have also seen, especially for minorities, higher percentage of low percentage of school attendance. One thing that the reopening committee had done almost consistently is trying to track attendance every time we have a meeting to look at where we are. But that was one of the issues. We provided differentiating and getting kids ready by introducing Algebra 8 in 7th grade. And then we are now at 50% of our kids taking advanced classes. So again, this 80% goal, we have another, how many years? 2 years to get there. I consider that after we get out of this pandemic, it's going to be a new baseline to see what have been our losses and how to recuperate and deal with that. At this point, we have developed some individual student growth plan to see how one school start support all those kids who are way behind where they should be. Summer school is being used to do that too. So for areas of improvement, we were not able to work on the French test. We were thinking of doing either the European test or with UMKC. UMKC last year we did not do the test. This year either we did not do the test because we used to do a test of 7th and 8th graders, but we did not do that. The AVID program, we don't think at this point we chose to go for restorative justice for managing our students. And I think that we have to be just careful of too many programs and we'll overwhelm our teachers. So that's something that we haven't adopted. So again, goal number 3.2 is advanced classes where we are 50% at this point where our kids are taking it. Minorities, we need to see how many still were able to take it. I think they're underrepresented in the advanced classes. That's something that, of course, should be a focus on for Algebra 1 and English 1. But for after-school program, we have also developed additional after-school programs. That's part of accepting or part of, I would say, approving a new program. We have a form where we want to know how many kids coming and what is the breakdown of those kids who enrolled. That's something that probably we need to put on our dashboard report after school program. What is the breakdown of minorities and low income who are attending it, those programs? That's something probably, as was said, has to be provided. But we have offered more after school program and we've offered more support also for academically disadvantaged, but we are not yet at the same representation for low income at that class. I think that that's something that we will be tending to do and working hard toward, but we're not there. But in terms of advanced class, if you look at our test scores, our MAP test scores, latest or before, you will see that the percentage of our kids who advance, because there are 4 categories for the test scores MAP. They're below basic, proficient, and advanced. The percentage of, we have a almost higher percentage of advanced kids than any other school district generally. And it's higher than the proficient. So there is a gap of what we're offering as program is very rigorous, but we have to be careful leaving out those kids who are struggling and creating even a wider gap. I think our school program is very rigorous, but something has to be done, and we're working on that to make sure that those kids who are lagging behind won't left behind even further. That's why I'm working with a group of teachers to reinforce kindergarten, 2nd grade, math, and French for the coming years, because that's where the gaps start. We have a lot of absences and different things that we need to take care of. If you have a question, please, you can interrupt me and ask your question as I move forward. So for social-emotional learning, we have not this year, but we started giving in 2020 training for our teachers with social-emotional learning and trauma-informed schools. We have a principal, Heather, coordinated with School Smart, and we have received training again for social-emotional and trauma-informed in French. So that the last one we did was 1920. We haven't done any since then. We have been focused on how to teach online for the last year or so. So the key action number 2, develop and utilize effective media center with support of support staff to facilitate this type of learning. So those are the kind of key action that sometimes you have a problem understanding what the people who put it there, what they needed to say. That's the danger of having, I mean, not danger, but trouble of having different people putting things and trying to figure out what they mean by develop and utilize effective media center with support staff to facilitate this type of learning. So I think that what we've done, though, we went beyond the training, is incorporated in teachers' evaluation now. Culturally relevant pedagogy, diversity, inclusion, equity, and socio-emotional learning are all included now into the teachers' evaluation, educator evaluation, to support them and track how they're being implemented. So this one, I think, about integrating on effective use of technology to enhance student learning. We have been forced, I think, by the pandemic to be right there, to have to do that. Personally, I had resisted one-to-one because I thought that it may not be what we needed. So at this point, we have one-to-one. Everybody is, every student is able to get their device, and we have invested a lot of money to support low income for the access to hotspots, connectivity, and I think we are there, and we have hired a major a librarian for the IB MYP, and she's working on supporting our library to be where it needs to be. So we're still working on the school technology plan. The IT department had many meetings during the school year with different committees, but it has not been finalized yet. Goal 315. I think also we've done a really good job for our special education program. By the way, anytime we present data, achievement data, is disaggregated by learning, I mean, special needs, ELL, and so on for the map. And every year, our special needs students outperform by far the average of the state. We've invested a lot of money in that department. We hired, every year we hired people, I mean, teachers we need. Years ago, I would say 9 years ago, we were at 3% of our population with special need. Now we are at 9%, around 8.59%. And we have provided the support needed. And it shows in year over year in their performance.
Have we hired, I think we have hired special ed teachers? Or are we still outsourcing?
Yeah, no, we have now 3 full-time in our school, but the rest is outsourced.
Okay. Are we going to hire another one? Or are we going to?
2 years ago, we did not have any full-time person hired in our staff. It was all outsourced. Now we have now 3. Next year we'll have 3 hired full-time, and the rest is outsourced.
How many are outsourced, would you say? Are there 4 teachers outsourced, or what is the number?
Those teachers outsourced are retired special ed teachers who do not teach full-time. They have part-time role, maybe 2 days here, and so on. I would say around 4.
Okay.
Then full-time, they work 3 days per week or 2 days a week. So I think that part we've last year I started meeting with the special need director every other month. We will continue to do it this coming year just to review what's happening and see the needs But again, I think the school has done tremendous efforts to support students with special need. However, where we need to redirect our effort is ELL. So of course, our population of ELL is extremely low, maybe around 2%, and we're not receiving funding for that. But I think that this coming year we have to, it's already in the budget, provide more service for those students. So achievement gap, we have talked about it. Based on the actions on the strategic plan, yes, we've done a lot of things, but the gap is still here. And we, at this point, we don't have enough data based on, of course, this pandemic, but I think that things, efforts are being made, but the gap, again, we need to retain that is still here. We've adopted and implemented that trauma-informed support process. I would say process, but training so far. We've done the training, and we are still struggling there. We're not there. So for the recruitment of volunteers to support struggling learners, I put it area of improvement, but we did not have last year any reading intervention. It's a reading intervention that we recruited parents and community members to come and read, help our kids to read, but it didn't happen last school year at all. And by the way, since we implemented, looks like because nobody is on the big room now, the light is out. It's automatically. Looks like I'm okay.
May have to wave your arms. You look like you're in a cave.
Okay, you have to move.
There we go.
For the light to come back. Sorry. So we have encouraged parents and grandparents to come and read for the reading intervention. We did not have it last year. And we did not also have any interns to support those kids. So again, this coming school year looks like we're coming back from another baseline in terms of student achievement and student performance.
And I mean, in regards to the data that we can expect to see once we have access to data again, I think we know here at Lafayette, as well as across the country, we will see those achievement gaps grew over the last year because our families impacted by poverty just can't provide the support for virtual learning. So I think what we can all expect to see is not only is the achievement gap not decreasing, it probably increased over the last year. So we have a greater challenge than we did before.
Yes, some of in lower grade, we've seen higher number of students. I'm talking about kindergarten, first grade, especially that was referred to for retention. And unfortunately, the majority were minority students. So what we did was, instead of retaining all those students, is to work with the families and put in place at least a year or multi-year plan that will have some requirement from the parents. One of them is attending summer school and limiting the number of absence for next school year, because many of those students have, I would say, 60 days of absence, 50 days of absence, 40 days of absence. And we are monitoring the progress during summer school, and for those who have the growth plan, and working with the families and see if they're attending summer school. Otherwise, we will have to retain those students next year, because moving them forward may not work, especially in lower grades, kindergarten, first grade. But again, the bottom line is the gap is still here between low socioeconomic and minorities and the rest of the students. So for teachers, I think that we've tried, and staff making that efforts, recruitment of minority of social workers and student affairs, I would say admissions, there's been some effort in minorities recruitment. However, we have really hard time attracting, for the teachers part, African American teachers of English in English and Hispanic. We have few Hispanic, but African American has turned out to be very hard to find for our English teachers. And also we some sort of diversity is attracting some Belgium and Canadian teachers, French speaking, has turned out to be extremely also challenging. But for the accomplishment, we still, now last year, as you know, we recruited 7 teachers who were not able to have the visa to come here. We had to struggle to find how to support, staff the classes. This coming year, we may still have that issue. So again, this is one of those areas that would be hardly impacted, strongly impacted by the pandemic, getting teachers here, and even interns. So for the onboarding part and making teachers ready, we contracted and worked with Teacher for America. That is, they're in charge of onboarding and helping our teachers, new teachers, adjust and know what are the expectation. First, it was funded by School Smart, but we still have to pay a good portion of it. And we've also included, as I said, develop a new teacher evaluation, including diversity, equity, and inclusion. At the same time, we're training our teachers for culturally responsive teaching. We still have mentoring. Our new teachers, each of our new teachers has a mentor for 2 years. I'm talking about one of our veteran teachers. The professional growth, supporting the professional growth of all educators in content areas and supporting the diverse learners. Yes, every year we have a professional development plan that we have to alter, of course, because the last year and a half we put the emphasis on online teaching and learning and using technology and so on. We did training in culturally responsive teaching, a couple of training, but we did not move forward for full implementation of our immersion training, immersion education training, math, and so on. Some of our teachers attend online math training with UCM, but that has not been, as I said, prior to this last year. It was more technology, teaching online, and so on. We have the training, of course, for our new teachers, as I said. So this coming year, we're developing, as we're finalizing our yearly development plan, professional development plan, immersion will come back at the center, and also more lesson studies in content areas. Lesson studies means that teachers will model a lesson and others will watch them and discuss it, the lessons. So this is the last one. I hope I not take a lot of time, but for the collaboration, we also we're there. We're doing a lot of things to make sure that our teachers are supported and create a culture of collaboration. We have building social committees that did not really meet last year, and then we realized also our teachers need more support, more emotionally speaking, because of the pandemic. For instructional resources, AIR will provide adequate instructional resources to all educators. Normally we give, if our teachers, of course, technology-wise, we have covered that. Every of our teachers get the needs, even though our smart board now, and especially team board at Cherry, has to be changed. They are obsolete and where we need it to be. But we provide our teachers personal budget. Last year was cut to $300. Next year is going back to $600 for teachers, and also provide every single resources or the resources they need to do their job.
Mr. Mbang, you mentioned on the table option above it, the pandemic requires that we better support our staff emotionally. I'm glad that we've identified that. What are we doing about it? Because it kind of relates to John's point in the chat of staffing is the issue. So I'm just curious what the plan is.
Yeah, we're trying to, whenever we meet, to try to see as leadership, teacher support, what is happening. The problem is we're between, I say, the rock and hard place. We don't have enough staff on one side, and sometimes teachers just need to have more personal time and less demanding things to lower the stress. But as you know, there's so many things happening at the same time that require teachers to completely change their way of teaching. So we've tried to share ways to lower stress, to stay away from situation like that, but also, if possible, for teachers who have family concerns, try to be very understanding and see how we can support that.
I'm just wondering if that is a volunteer opportunity where we could create a committee of parents that want to, adopt a teacher and really love on them, care for them, send them little reminders that they're special and important. Maybe that's already in existence, but if not, that could be something for discussion.
Yeah, it's important to do that, I think. And last but not least, for the resource data, we have already the teachers survey, and then that we did not administer last May, but we administer it every year in December, in May. We do not use anymore the survey we used to have. Now we need to come up with something for students and parents. It's already in goal number 2 that we will discuss later, but we have to get another way to come back and survey our teachers and our students and staff. We used to do that, but we have not done it last school year. So any question? I think we're done there. Any question and anything left out?
I mean, the only thing that I would stress is, it's helpful to hear what are the strategies we're using to address each of the objectives that we have. What we're missing is, how is the data moving? How is the dial sort of actually moving based on the strategies? And that's sort of what our initial conversation focused on, that we hope to get to in the next year, to really look at. I think the strategies that you talked through, that you're focused on, are great. I always worry we have a few too many focuses. And so to just sort of teacher stress level, how are we making sure to not pile too much on you and the teachers, and just have a few really key things that we do amazingly well, that we know have the greatest impact. So that's always just one of my worries, is that just how that adds to the stress level in the environment.
Yeah, that's correct, and that's my concern too. I understand there's so many things going on, and we just have, in my opinion, whether it's the board or the leadership or teachers, focus on what matters, because otherwise we will just disperse our efforts, and then everybody's tired and frustrated, as opposed to saying, what do we need to know what are the vital signs of our school. That's why probably we developed also, and we will do it next year. It's already discussed that whether it is grade levels, buildings, the system side, and the board, things that we need to be on a monthly basis to see. So let me show you. Let me see. Can you see my screen now?
Mm-hmm.
So this is the data that we're thinking of, at least at the board level, grade level in classroom, to be looking at on a regular basis. What are your standard attendance? What are your discipline? All this data should be disaggregated in low income, minorities, and special education. That at least at the building level, one of the meeting is projecting the attendance of the month, the discipline of the month, the achievement. The achievement is the toughest one, because what I was thinking of is whether Tyler can pull out the grades of our students and show by grade level how kids are doing. I'm not talking about test scores, but at least at the grade level, the grades, how kids doing. And then the teacher or the principal can dig down and say which classroom has more issues, if the teacher needs some support, either for classroom management or for teaching and learning to do it. So, but at the same time, we need to make sure that we are not wearing out our staff and teachers with is day-to-day to data as opposed to giving them time to teach. So that's what we're thinking of. The goal is making the buildings as autonomous as possible to be able to do these things and then pull it out and present to the teachers. It serves no purpose if this data are presenting to the board or leadership. It should go down to the teachers. They know their data and then move up all the way to be able to address those things. So I'm done.
Sounds good.
This
Any
is
other questions?
I shared with Tyler to
strategic
get it
plan?
ready. But so far, I'm not really satisfied with what we have.
If there aren't other questions or thoughts on that, do you want to pull up the revisions that the diversity committee recommended just specifically to that goal too? And I can sort of talk through that. Or I also have it up if you want me to share it.
I have it. That's fine. You mean the goal the goal number? This one?
Yep, that one.
No.
Well, not that.
That one. Let me.
Yep. So yeah, well, I think one of the things that the diversity committee has been talking about over the last year is the work that we felt like we were doing and that we thought was most critical to really move the dial forward didn't align directly with the strategic plan and with the goal that all of our committees should really be in support of the strategic plan. We felt like just based on the fact that we're in a very different place today than we were when the plan was written, it makes sense to really revise our strategic plan. And so it started with just the diversity statement. There was just one sentence that we changed in the diversity statement, and it's that second one that talks about we're a learning community that embraces and goes on to really identify all the different ways our community is diverse. I think we had gotten some questions over the last year. When we think about diversity, are we just talking about racial diversity? Because obviously that was really a focus of our conversation, but we wanted to be clear that when we think about the importance and value of diversity, we mean diversity of all kinds. And so we really just wanted to better articulate what we mean. And so that's sort of what you see there in that second sentence, just being very clear about what we mean there. The rest is all the same. So if you want to scroll down then to the goals. I mean, one big thing in that objective 2.1 is what I was talking about earlier. I think what we see as a really key piece of our work is creating that sense of belonging for every single one of our students and thinking about sort of what are the actions that it takes to really create that in our classrooms. And one is many of our teachers don't know how to do that, right? I mean, we can all recognize that's a really important goal, but we may not know how to create that environment in the classroom. So we need to be really purposeful about the professional development that we provide to teachers. We also need to engage in regular conversations about it, which you all will remember. We sort of started those conversations at the parent level last year, but how does that trickle down into our classrooms? How are we having those same kind of conversations with our students, with our sort of overall school community, to make sure we all get comfortable in talking about issues of diversity, issues of race, and the impact that it has on our students. So really engaging student voice is something we haven't done in the past, but we think will add tremendous value to what that looks like in the classroom. So that's what you can sort of see are the focus of that objective 2.1. And I know hopefully people had a chance to sort of read through the specific ideas prior. Any thoughts or questions about why we're sort of proposing those actions? Or Kelly, anything that you would want to add based on our conversations? No?
No, I think you covered it very well. I mean, I just think we're trying to address, all of it. And, the diversity committee, like you said, things have definitely changed since this was first done. So I just think we've incorporated a lot of what's been happening in today's world. So I think that was good.
So if you want to scroll down then to the next objective. The focus of this one is really how do we change teaching practice? What and how should our teachers be teaching? And this work definitely started over the last school year. So really, how do we help teachers understand what culturally responsive teaching is? So rethinking what we're teaching in every subject in each one of our classrooms, what does that look like? As well as how are our students represented in the materials that they're reading, whether that's through English class, through the library, making sure they see themselves in all of that becomes really important. So it's really, this one, the focus is both on the curriculum, what we're reading, and the resources we use. So even just to the physical environment of our classrooms, really making sure all of those have a huge impact on how our students learn when they can really see themselves represented. So yeah, that's the focus of that piece. Questions or thoughts on that? Nope. Go ahead, you can scroll down to the next piece. So this really becomes more, how are we engaging everyone in the conversation? So we talked about what does it look like to really create that belonging in our classrooms? How are our teachers teaching differently? And then how do we engage more our families as well? How do we listen to our families about how they are feeling? So this is where we implemented sort of the need for a survey, which we talked about before. That's a key piece of data that I think we're missing in this conversation that's critical to see what our families, what our teachers, what our students all say about the culture, how they're feeling, and use that to then drive practice. It also includes the conversations that we started last year with our families just related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, recognizing not all of us are having those conversations in our personal lives and our professional lives. So it's really important for the school community to be a driver and a leader in that conversation, essentially. But then also, how are our teachers just developing stronger relationships with our families? You'll see a really specific thing about communicating with parents when things are going well. I think too often we can sort of fall into the trap of just reaching out to families when things are off track and something's wrong, but that oftentimes harms relationships with our families as opposed to really helps build stronger relationships. And so being purposeful there, as well as looking at the data, where do we have representation from all of our different communities? So whether that's on the Council to Cole, the PTO, our student council, sort of all of those places that we should look to see, do we have representation equally to make sure we're making space and valuing the voice of our community. And then there's just one final one, if you want to scroll back down. So this really is about what is the data that we're looking at to know, are we on track? And so you can see sort of some of the pieces that we talked about in the data conversation. One piece that we didn't specifically mention that was definitely a focus of our conversation is bullying. Who's more likely to get bullied in our classroom? And it's really important for us to sort of know what that looks like, because that oftentimes obviously shows just the culture in our classrooms. But just how do we effectively look at and utilize data to make sure we're using that to drive practice was the focus of that final objective. So that is sort of the overall recommendation of the diversity committee, because it is revising the strategic plan. It is something that we will need to vote on. So I don't know if people did have a chance to review it before today and feel comfortable voting on it today to sort of approve a revision, or if people feel like they need more time, would like to look a little more closely at it and vote on it at our next meeting. But questions, thoughts, comments?
So this is a revision to the strategic plan.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, that's our recommendation.
Okay. And then my question is, on the strategic plan, is it 1 year or 2 year out before we have to create a new one?
I think 2 year, wasn't it 2018 to 23?
2 years.
That sounds right.
The 5-year plan, 2018, 2023.
No.
So we have 2 years. So this will take into the other ones he's been working on for 2 or 3 years. Whereas we need to realize this, you've changed the type thing that we may not meet all of our expectations on this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a really important point to notice. Obviously, with a 2-year window, our expectations would be lower, and yet we didn't want to wait 2 years to really be clear about what do we think is the right work to be focused on. So rather than waiting, we thought it was important to really re-clarify what do we think this work takes.
Okay. I'm not sure we can vote, and John, that's just a question to you. Usually in this kind of a meeting, we don't take a vote on those kind of issues. But I mean, I don't have a problem. I'm just saying we've never voted at a strategic meeting on board policies type stuff.
Right. So are we supposed to vote on something now, or what it was?
Well, that was my question. So if we agree that yes, we do think a revision to the strategic plan is the right way to go based on the recommendation of the diversity committee, it would require a board vote. We don't have to take that today. We could take it at our next scheduled board meeting. I just sort of put it out there as a question as to when would be the right.
I mean, it's really, there's nothing magic about delaying and waiting for an official board meeting. I mean, we have a quorum where this is an official board meeting. We posted notice, things like that. So, I mean, it's really just if we don't want to, if we weren't prepared to vote on this, we shouldn't vote on it yet. But if we absolutely wanted to, there's no problem with us doing it at this meeting. We just typically have not done that.
What is the motion that we're considering?
The motion would be to approve the revised strategic plan goal number 2 as recommended by the diversity committee, I believe.
Marvin, you got your hand raised?
Yeah, so actually we have voted in strategic meetings before. It's been quite some time since we have done it, but we have voted on policy changes and such in times past. So there is a precedence for it. And to John's point, I mean, we've given sufficient notice, but I guess I have a different issue as it relates to the changes. So I think one of the things that happens when we begin to talk about diversity, and please don't take this the wrong way as if I disagree, that we've got to make sure that we are an inclusive school environment for all of our children, all of our families. But I think to get to, when we go away from race and racism, I think we dilute our intentionality when it comes to making sure that we're being equitable, particularly to Black students and Black families. Now, again, I recognize that we've come a long way at Académie Lafayette, but we're, but it's not like we're in a microcosm or what have you, where nothing else, or in a vacuum where nothing else exists around us in terms of education. So, I think it becomes important that we don't just always be so general, but we get specific with regards to race and racism if we are going to remain that institution. While all of us might have be in alignment and have the same heart, who's to say that things may not change with different set of leadership or different set of parents, and the community evolves over time. We've seen that nationally. So that is my main concern that would actually cause me to vote no today. And then, where's, I'm not a part of the committee, but has there been any discussion about the 1619 project and, where we're going with curriculum in that regard? For my family in particular, and I know many other Black families, we've been teaching the 1619 project at home, and that has showed up in the classrooms. And to Beth's point about bullying, it hasn't necessarily been labeled bullying, but when my children have showed up with a different set of information and have presented that in the classroom, and it went against the norm, for some of our teachers, it caused them to take a deeper dive and to look at the facts and to empower my daughters, right? But in other situations, we've had some teachers and students in particular that have said, no, this didn't happen, or this is not the case. And this is, they're going with what they have always been taught. So I just think we need to make sure that we're really looking at race and racism, and as we talk about being inclusive and diverse. Again, when we go that route and we don't address those specific issues, I think we end up going the path of thinking that we have arrived to some sort of pseudo colorblind society, and we end up doing more damage than good.
And I greatly appreciate your feedback and agree with absolutely everything you said. The issue of how are we teaching history from a more factual standpoint as opposed to a whitewash standpoint absolutely have been part of the discussion of the committee, and talked about the 1619 project. I think the teachers on the committee mentioned they don't want to use just one. There might be multiple resources. And so for this strategic plan to keep it more broad, that it's important to really teach from a more culturally responsive perspective with the things that you're talking about. They just aren't outlined in the strategic plan. But it's absolutely the focus of what we intended. Do you feel like that intention doesn't come across in this plan because of that sort of overarching statement at the beginning?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I felt like it was too general. But again, I recognize what we're trying to achieve, but I've been around 45 years, and I've seen similar approaches, let me say it that way. And I've seen how this approach is really watered down to some extent when the language is not specific, how it's watered down what we really attempted to do, and can really cause us to regress. That's my concern.
And I can understand that too, Marvin, because I mean, in the diverse committee, we have had these conversations, and even the tough conversations. But I can understand that this is just very generalized, and it can the main focus can get lost and be diluted, as you indicated. So it might be something that we as the diversity committee can go back and maybe reword this or do something to include, but I definitely understand and agree with what you're saying.
I guess I'm wondering if we had a statement at the beginning. So in the same way, we have the inclusive statement that all means all, but the intention is to recognize the impact that systemic racism has on our students, like really calling out something like that as the overarching framework of this. Does that then help you feel like we're getting at making sure that that is an absolute place that we are clear is a focus?
Can I jump in real quick? Can we scroll up and let us see that paragraph as Marvin is going to talk? I just want to like see that overarching comment. Before that, scroll up more. Okay, got it. Thank you.
So actually, yes, I would agree with that, Beth.
But my question, since John has said we can approve this and Marvin has said we can approve this, my problem is that we go back to committee and rewrite a statement. I'd like to approve. I'd at least like to get the strategic plan approved so that we can move forward. We don't have to wait 2 months as we all confess or write stuff. Does that make sense? Because Marvin's looking at me like I'm crazy.
Marvin, we've talked about, as Beth said, integrating explicitly the 1619 project. And the question is, as you know, there's 2 ways to deal with issue of race and racism. I think the data you collect will tell you, and not only the data, but the perception survey you're doing with minorities and different students will tell you how people feel about schools and what's happening. The second one is curriculum. When we talk about culturally relevant curriculum, we're talking about curriculum that's relevant to every single learners and using different sources. So one way, as you know, at this country now, there's a whole political debate of banning things, 69 project, critical race theory. And I heard that Missouri is joining those states to do that. So my question is, can we achieve the same thing without creating whole controversy that is not necessary for us, but we achieve the exact same thing? What I'm saying, achieve the exact same thing is when we talk about curriculum audit, we talk about curriculum audit to make sure our curriculum, the material we're teaching, is relevant to every single students. We're talking about teaching our kids culturally relevant curriculum, and then making sure that resources and everything is diverse. That's what we think, that it is more general, but also is more inclusive, and as opposed to explicitly saying we will be teaching LGBTQA curriculum or 1619 curriculum. That was our discussion, point of our discussion.
So you want to teach the 1619 project, but without explicitly saying.
No. Right. We're not teaching the 1619 project as a curriculum, but as it is one of the different resources we can use when we audit. Let's say we audit social studies. Our teachers need to see, once they're teaching slavery, did they do different perspective of slavery? Did they do a different perspective of the history of Egypt, for instance? Because the story of Egypt is European-centric, as opposed to using different other sources. If they're using the story of, we have also here, I don't know what this action item is, having discussion around diversity with students, school council, diversity, equity, and inclusion, racism, and so on. So that's what we're thinking of, giving availability for our teachers to use different resources that reflect the diversity of our school community.
So, go ahead, Marvin. Sorry.
Go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
Well, I'm trying to sort of synthesize what Marvin said and what Mr. Bang said in this CRT stuff. I think Missouri will ban CRT as quick as they can.
Mhm.
And I also agree with Marvin that if you make this language too broad, then you don't do what CRT is trying to do, which is be very direct. I don't have an answer for this, but this sort of seems to be the problem that we're having in this discussion is we need to be direct and address direct educational gaps or just whitewashing and all these things. But if we get too direct with our language, we're going to catch a lot. We're going to catch a lot, because they're going to ban CRT in Missouri. We all know they're going to do that. So I'm sorry. That's just sort of how I'm thinking about it right now. I don't know. I don't have an answer, but
I think the statement that Beth made with regards to adding systemic racism and I can't even frame it how she did it earlier, but I think when we add that to that opening statement, then I think that gets us where we're going. We don't necessarily have to name the resources because again, we're the board, so we're over governance. So we're just setting a larger policy, a larger vision. It's up to Mr. Mbang and the team to decide what resources actually match what that vision and policy is. And so because I agree with you, Mike, it's going to be banned before the conversation ever begins. But I think that's how we get there and make everybody happy. Yeah.
Yes, tell you, we received, I'm glad we did not, I think we did not explicitly, because of the discussion, put it here. I received, the next day we have this thing, I received a sunshine request from an institute in St. Louis asking any discussion, any curriculum, anything that has CRT 1619 project, anything to send that. I said, okay, I'm going to send you our diversity statement about what we do, but we don't have anything like that. But I'm trying to say that simply, whether it's, I saw it coming that probably it's going to be banned. But what I'm trying to say is, it's not trying to cheat or going around or something to teach something that may be banned. It's about being genuine. When we're teaching our kids different perspective, period. Okay? We're teaching different perspectives. What is the perspective of Hispanic about something? What's the perspective of Black about something? And also making sure that we're not teaching just a single story, that, as that lady said, the danger of a single story. So I think that that inclusive way is something that may be more effective and efficient.
So I think the question is, for today's purposes, if we add sort of that statement that I put in the chat related to systemic racism right after, so the second sentence is, we're a learning community that embraces all of these, and then Académie Lafayette understands sort of the impact of systemic racism, if we put that sentence last with a colon focused on promoting equity, actively engaging, to make it clear that is absolutely a focus of the work that we do. I'm curious, or we can also take some time to sort of think about that and vote on it in July if we prefer.
Can you say it to me again, what you want to put and where you want to put it?
Yes, so at the end of the statement right now, so it says, we're a learning community that embraces, and Mr. Mbang, I don't know if you have the ability to sort of copy paste that in, but at the end of that learning community, we would say Académie Lafayette recognizes the negative impact that systemic racism has on our students and is therefore focused on, promoting equity, actively engaged, sort of those same bullets there. So just adding one additional statement that talks about we absolutely have a focus on the issues of systemic racism.
I just shared it with you. You can put it directly there if you can.
But I mean, the other piece that I will say, because we know, unfortunately, these issues are very politically charged, right? The people try to make this about politics. And as a board, I think what we will need to do is be clear. We believe in the value of all of our students. And that's why we have this diversity statement. That's why we have this diversity work. This is not an issue of political, regardless of how much people want to make it political. So I do think we will need to be prepared for any pushback we get, to not let that sort of sway the work that we do, that this is the school that we are.
On the first bullet, the only word I'd like to see we consider adding is the word thrive, promoting equity in every classroom every day to ensure each student has what they need to thrive and reach their full potential.
Which one? First bullet? Oh.
Yes, the first bullet. Just, I think thriving in the process of reaching their full potential, you know, thrive, and they need to thrive. And
for some reason, I'm having computer troubles that I can't get to where I want to go to sort of make those edits.
So let me copy what you put on the chat and see if I can put it there. That's easier.
And then where your cursor is, just add the word "and." So there you go.
And I'm just going to make a comment. You know, I think it's good that we are making suggestions. Number one, I would not be comfortable voting on this today. I need to kind of mull around because I'm very concerned that we are pulling something out when we already are kind of saying it. So I just need to kind of think about that, because I think we just need a little more time on this to add additional things today after a committee has made a recommendation to us today. I need to think about it now.
I think that's absolutely fair. And I think because it's clear that I think it does require just a little bit more thought. We will send this revised document out to everybody with the revisions that we talked about today, with a plan for final discussion at our July board meeting, if that works.
Beth, my question would be, when does your committee meet again? Because I think they need an opportunity to respond to these additions.
It's a very good call. We do not have a meeting over the summer currently.
Right. Yeah, we don't have a meeting over the
summer. And yet I think most people are responding to email. I think we can email them the recommendations that the board has made to see, do we need to sort of reconvene a conversation? My guess is the committee would be very comfortable with that, sort of with the revisions that we discussed. So I think we could do it by email, but agree it will be important to engage them in that conversation too.
Yep, I agree, Beth. We could probably, even if it's just a quick call, I mean, you know, yeah.
Yeah.
I think you need to read this where it says, we are a learning community that embraces the differences in racial and cultural identities and backgrounds. You've got that whole sentence, and then you pulled out another direct sentence on race. I don't have a problem with the sentence. I have a problem with how this might be perceived.
Okay, so yeah, I think we will sort of take another look at it after this and consider how we want to move forward.
Can we approve, though, the plan? You know, this is a diversity statement that's going somewhere, but can we approve our strategic plan? It has no effect on the strategic plan.
I think we already approved the plan. This is just kind of a, sorry, thought we're
changing the plan.
Dashboard or an update of where we are on our strategic plan that we approved 3 years ago.
I actually agree with Harriet. I think we need to approve, because these are significant revisions. We totally reworked goal number 2. So these aren't just updates. I do think it probably requires a board vote. I guess I don't see a downside to doing that July all in once versus today, I don't think that delays any of the work essentially.
Well, I'm afraid that we're going to get delayed.
Oh, got it.
Well,
I don't
afraid
think
that
we're
we're
ready
gonna
to
have
vote on
more-
anything today, because I thought this, I maybe misunderstood, but I thought this was just kind of a checkpoint status of where we are in our strategic plan, you know, which is what we've kind of targeted for the goal of each of our board retreats. But if we're talking about redoing one of the goals and reword, I mean, that's a change. And, you know, I think we need to have a little bit more discussion than just an hour before we vote on something.
No, they've redone the goal too.
Right.
It's totally redone. I mean, not, but yeah, it's totally. So, okay. That's what I started this with. Can we vote on this? And you both said, yes, we can. Now we're back to, and I'm not trying to argue, but.
No, if we wanted to vote, we can. I thought that was your question was, can we? I'm like, yeah, we can, but I don't think we should. That's the.
Okay. All right. Because my problem is we all get into these wordsmiths on stuff, and we could wordsmith this in July meeting as we wordsmith it, and then we move it to August before we get this approved. Whereas if we could just approve the strategic plan, that is a little different than the diversity that we're all going to get busy in wordsmith pretty soon.
So are the goals on one page, just the goals statement, not the objectives, but the goals? Are they ever in a place where it's just a one-page sheet that say, these are our goals that we could approve? And the actual objectives of how we're getting there is a different discussion or a different approval process?
Well, just, I mean, it was shared, of course, the board needs time to read it. Maybe you can plan for the July board meeting to vote on this and discuss and vote. The reason I'm saying is this. We have to start planning for next school year as administration. We're planning, setting our goals, it will be based on the strategic plan. So by the time you talk about mid-August, and as administration, our retreat is on July the 30th, Friday, July 30th. And we have to set, based on what we have, our strategic plan, set our goal, and try to set department goals based on all these things. So that's why I think that it's explained, and then board members can read it, and then on July board meeting, we can have a discussion and vote or no.
And I mean, to Harriet's point, I think we just need to commit to everybody looking at this afterwards, thinking about any sort of questions, concerns you have that can be addressed prior to July 12th board meeting, so that we can have, that there's not additional wordsmithing, that we can sort of figure out any other concerns people have that we can try to address ahead of time. If that sounds right to everybody, I know that we have gone a little bit over time, so we definitely want to let people get on to their Saturdays. I do want to just sort of recognize Tanya, to thank her for her service. This is her last official board meeting today, so I think her feedback and thoughts and just engagement as a board member have been tremendously valuable. So you will be missed as a board member. If I understand correctly, I think you might still be involved in the development committee. So we appreciate your continued willingness to support Lafayette.
Thank you, Beth. It's been my pleasure to contribute what little I can offer, and I appreciate everybody's just acceptance and help, and just, yeah, it's been a very good process, and I've been very blessed to be considered and be able to serve, and I really appreciate the opportunity to do so.
Thanks.
Thank you very much for your service.
I have a question. On July's board meeting, we're obviously discussing this.
Yes.
Are we having CMSU or CMU or whatever the people are?
UCM.
Yeah. Are we having them?
Right. I don't know, Mr. Mbang, did you hear back from them? They were supposed to be at our last meeting.
Oh, UCM?
Yes.
Yeah, she sent an email about that, and what she was saying was, per our charter or the school, I mean the DESI status or charter school, they're only obligated to submit every other year, present it to the board. They did it last year, but we can still invite them. I'll get back to them and see if she wants to just send it or come and present it. I'll reach out to her and see.
And then are we going to do test scores?
Pardon?
Are we going to do NY, whatever those test scores?
Well, yes, we can do that. I'll ask Bruce to come and present it.
Those are three big.
I mean, are we going to have time in the July meeting to, I think it's important that this discussion around the strategic plan be discussed in a group. I don't want to just think about it on my own. I like to hear other people's point of view. I think this is a very, very, very important piece of information. And if I just don't want to, all of us go back to our houses and try to stare at this document and wordsmith it. I think that's of little value. I'd rather hear everyone's perspectives and have an open debate about this. So I just want to make sure that we're going to have time to do that on the July meeting, or perhaps we should just do it now.
I would say let's not do it now. I think we are far over what we have asked people to commit to today. So I think people have other things that they need to get to, but I agree it warrants additional conversation that we can do on our next board meeting. I would just ask everybody review it and think about any concerns that you would want to raise so we can be prepared to think about those during the discussion. Right.
And there's some of the normal things that we usually do in a board meeting that didn't we talk about maybe not doing, like the full finance committee. We probably don't, I can't remember. I don't think we'll have had a development committee or summer meeting, so we can take some of those things off.
Right. I do think we talked about it would be a special board meeting just with specific agenda items, not the general updates that we typically do at every other meeting.
So hopefully that'll give us enough time.
And we have a special budget meeting on Monday night, you all will remember. So we'll do the budget conversation Monday.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Right.
If we just have three things, it should go quicker than it's still a normal board meeting. We don't have finance, we don't have head of school report and things like that. So.
Right. Agreed. All right. Well, I think we should officially adjourn the meeting. Appreciate everybody's sort of thought and engagement in the conversation today, because it is really important work that we do. So I appreciate everybody's feedback, and we can go ahead and adjourn the meeting.
Have a good one.
Have a good one. Thank you, Tanya.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, Tanya.
Hi, Don.
Bye.